Today, we're going to chat with Dylan about his work, his career as both a professional dancer and artist, and how it is he taps into artistic inspiration. Thank you so much for jumping in. My name is Amar Alexis, but you can call me Lex. Dylan Smith is a professional dancer, mixed media artist, and clothing designer based out of Los Angeles. He has performed on Broadway and in theater productions around the world. And he's also worked with television studios like Nickelodeon as a live action choreographer. He has also launched a clothing line called Hair Pop Out Mania, which features a pop art style all around print inspired by his early childhood drawings. Dylan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Very grateful to be here with you.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's great that we were able to get this together. I was fortunate enough to run into you at a gallery opening, and I'm really glad to have an artist on the podcast. I don't get very many artists. So, welcome. Really happy to have you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, I know that you've done quite a bit of work in the kind of traditional art world, the fine art world. You have a clothing line, a fashion brand. So, I guess, where do you want to start? How did you become an artist, and how have you become a professional artist?
Yeah, I would say that it sprung from a childhood hobby and a childhood passion before my long career in dance and theater and choreography and TV and film. I passed the summer days drawing with my neighbors, and that was just one of these activities that were, really fun for us. Was crayons, Crayola markers, notebook paper, just very, anything a child would do as far as a hobby. And in my mid 20s, when I was living in New York City and doing professional theater, I went rummaging through my mom's attic, out of nostalgia, because I would never let her throw anything away for fear that there was some gold mine there or something really cool, hiding in the attic. And lo and behold, in a Garfield and Odie folder from my childhood were all my drawings. And all my drawings were of, at that time, what I would say was a female figure or a female sort of headshot, and lots of them, like between 40 and 50 different images. And at this point, I was very much like established in my dance and theater career, and I just got such a kick out of what I was doing prior to dance and theater and how I expressed myself, and that I ended up becoming and identifying as a gay man. And when you see my images, they're very kitschy, they're very colorful, they're very flamboyant. And so connecting the story of my childhood passion to the way I veered into a different form of a professional artistic career really interested me and started to interest other people.
Yeah, no, I think that's such an interesting kind of story. Like you mentioned, this career in dance and theater and performance, and now kind of rediscovering that inner childhood artist. Were you doing illustrations at all up until this point, or really was it rekindled when you made that discovery in your mom's attic?
I would doodle, like I was in casting for a bit, and then like
Hmm.
there were long kind of tedious days where I would just like drift off into doodling, and I'd always go back to like the female like face or the female figure, but
Hmm.
nothing sort of major. But what I started doing with the old childhood drawings is I started putting them on tote bags, making postcards, doing little like one-off events, making a T-shirt for a friend here and there. And then um, someone challenged me in a conversation and said, "I love your childhood art, but are you going to make new pieces?" And I was
Hmm.
like, "Do I know how to draw? Like, am
Hmm.
I going to be good at it? Is it going to be anything like that?" And at that point, I had the choice to say no and be fearful, or kind of dip my toes back in and
Yeah.
try it out. And so from that conversation is when I sort of like started to sort of develop from there.
Yeah, and it seems like since then it's kind of evolved beyond illustration as well. It seems like maybe there's a bit of I'm not sure what you would call it, maybe a sculptural component. I saw one of your recent pieces was using the Barbie doll.
For sure. So yeah, it was very like two-dimensional for a very long time,
Hmm.
illustration, and I was kind of just doing the same thing, like crayons and markers, and sort of taking that same approach. And then ex-partner of mine who was in construction and a builder introduced me to like resin, and so we were taking a bunch of my illustrations and things and putting them in like beautiful frames that he would make, and then resining them like with a coat that looks like glass but it kind of holds it in. And
Hmm.
with that you're able to use a bunch of like mixed media, so I would use old jewelry and any sort of like household items, and just started to slowly develop more towards a mixed media route. And
Hmm.
so it sort of started to evolve in that sense, and then the scale started to increase as well. And this is right, I would say, like the year before COVID, which was when things
Hmm.
really sort of started to take off for me, because there was nothing else to do but make more art.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think a great period that many artists and creators just generally a great advantage of to take some of that free time and kind of sublimate it into creative endeavors. So, in terms of, kind of where you're taking your art, I know that you are. It looks like you're wearing one of your pieces. Is that
Yeah.
one of your shirts from your clothing line?
Yes, that's correct. And my
Oh,
back
that's
is being
awesome.
supported by one of my pillows.
Nice. That's awesome. So, where did you get the idea to start kind of putting these illustrations onto clothing?
I mean, I dabbled a little bit, and I think it's like a natural progression sometimes as an
Hmm.
artist, is to, put them on accessories or put them on clothing. And, I kind of did a mock up of a sweatsuit of one of my designs. And at that time, I was working on a television show for Nickelodeon as an associate choreographer. And
Hmm.
at this point, had only the sweatshirt and the sweatpants. So I wore them on set, because on set it's freezing. It's always like
Hmm.
60 degrees. I just wore it, and I would say at least 15 to 20 people on set that day were just like, "What are you wearing? What is that?" And so, like, sure, it felt good to, have that affirmation that, like,
Hmm.
yeah, people think it's cool, but it also created conversation. And that's where I've started to see the purpose in my art is
Hmm.
strangers coming up to me and people wanting to talk about it, and where did you get that and who made that. And it's very cool to say that I did, but it's also very cool to have human connection through art, and wearable art at that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a really interesting evolution of, again, that childhood artwork that you've taken into the modern era, put on your kind of new adult perspective and take on what this could look like, but ultimately
Yeah.
boiling it down to that fundamental kind of like a childlike wonder that encompasses your art. One of the interviews you had given, yeah, in the Coachella magazine, you had made reference to a famous quote by Pablo Picasso that every child is an artist. So, how would you say that this mantra has like influenced your art?
I like that quote, because once the ego and the adult brain starts to try and take over and get in the
Hmm.
way, it's a really good mantra to come back to remember the simplicity of like why we did things when we were little. We just did them because we enjoyed them. There
Hmm.
wasn't money attached to it. There weren't rules. There weren't, you know, your brain wasn't developed in a way where you're like, this isn't good or this is terrible or is it going to
Hmm.
be this. There wasn't this pressure. So to like go back to that and bring that back into your adult self and the decisions and the mentality that you take, kind of resets you and puts you in check, right? It's like, you know what I mean? I'm not a surgeon, I'm an artist. Like, we're
Right.
going to be okay if, the colors off or something. And another sort of mantra I go back to is there are no mistakes. A mistake can oftentimes be what makes something beautiful, and if it's not appealing to my personal taste or what I want, I can put another layer of paint. I can throw something over it. So it's
Hmm.
that quote really helps me lower the barometer of pressure, self-induced pressure, right? Because there's all
Hmm.
this like most people don't care. It's usually us who are like getting in our own way.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think that's one of the hurdles that many creators and artists really have trouble getting over, that sort of inner voice or inner doubt that you have about your own work. One concept that I've kind of come across recently is like productive procrastination, in that maybe you are procrastinating something, and the way that you kind of get around that is by busying yourself with something else.
Oh,
Um, yeah.
1000%. Guilty as charged with that for sure.
So, in terms of some of the different opportunities and work you've gotten to do as a result, I see you've been able to do a few things with the city of Palm Springs, as well as you were at the Hampton Art Fair. What are some other unique or interesting opportunities you've had, or that you look back to as kind of, just something you liked or really
Yeah.
enjoyed?
Well, the Palm Springs Public Arts Commission opportunities
Hmm.
happened during COVID, which was a really amazing opportunity. They were able to fund 50 different artists to refurbish
Hmm.
the city benches all across the city of Palm Springs,
Hmm.
which was great on many levels because a lot of people were obviously unemployed with, lacking opportunities to create art with some income behind it. And for me, again, this kind of goes back to the conversation the question we just wrapped up was, I had never painted before, like actually painted, and
Hmm.
applied for this position to create one of these benches with the city. And I was so scared and so nervous because here I am, the first opportunity I have to paint something for someone is,
Hmm.
I'm out in public painting this bench. But it was, again, it's a moment of like, do I retract and retreat, or do I move forward and grow as an artist? And I thought,
Hmm.
I'll get through this. And it was a pivotal moment for me because it gave me a little bit more clout and stature as far as
Hmm.
like, okay, the city is taking notice of something. It's not just a hobby, which would have been fine, but that opportunity really put me on the map. And when I moved to West Hollywood from Palm Springs to work on the television show, my goal, since I had worked with the city of Palm Springs, was I would love to be involved with the city of West Hollywood. And I
Hmm.
continue to apply for artist opportunities, and they have a very comprehensive, staff and opportunities through the city. And I applied for one of the diverse holiday submissions. And so
Hmm.
I chose National Coming Out Day and ended up being commissioned by the city with one of my images. So again, it encompasses so many things. It was like a goal of mine. It's also a really important holiday that's near and dear to me as someone who's part of the LGBTQ plus community.
Hmm.
Being part of the community of West Hollywood, getting involved, and creating art as a service. You know what I mean? Like creating this art and then being able to give it away to whoever wants to view it. And hopefully it brings happiness to someone. Maybe some confused person in our community can find joy and light through it. So those have been some real highlights
Hmm.
for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wasn't aware of the opportunity with West Hollywood. Where might we end up seeing it around the city?
It was actually on the website, so it wasn't physically out
Gotcha.
there, but yeah, promoted
Nice.
digitally. Yeah, it was really cool.
So, in terms of, I want to go back to some of what we were talking about related to your clothing. So,
Sure.
one of the questions I have for you is a bit more behind the scenes in terms of how is it that you actually get this clothing made? Are you like screen printing with a certain manufacturer? Do you have to hunt for certain partners? How do you go about creating these pieces now that you're selling them?
Yeah, it was a bit of trial and error at
Mm.
first, like finding a company that can take an image. So, my process is taking an image of a piece of my physical art. So, I
Hmm.
don't do anything digitally to actually create it. They're more like,
Right.
this is a picture of a outdoor installation I did for a client in Sonoma. And so,
Hmm.
as long as you have a high res photo, you can basically put it on anything. So
Hmm.
I found a company that would sublimate it, which means it goes into the fabric as opposed to being like
Hmm.
slapped on. and then
Right.
it's a cut and sew process. So I design the front, the back, the sleeve, and the sleeve, if we're talking about a t-shirt. So it's a
Mhm.
sublimation cut and sew process. And I just have found a company that I believe in the quality, the price point's good, and it works for now. But I think ideally, moving forward, to have a factory or someone who could make it,
Mhm.
like, say, in downtown Los Angeles would be the long term goal.
No, I think it looks great because I think that's as you look at individual kind of third party printers, typically they don't do something to that level of customization. Typically, it's just like maybe the image within an acceptable area,
Yeah.
something like that, and then you just buy many of them and kind of sell them. But I think kind of going the extra mile to kind of get that all around print ties in very well to the art piece itself because it is so interconnected with some of the different aspects of the collage and the kind of abstract shapes. So I think it looks great, and I'm going to have to get one myself.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So let's talk about the name. So your clothing line is called Hair Pop Up Mania, Pop Out Mania.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that name?
Okay. So that goes back to the childhood drawing. So you might be a little young to remember, but in the like late 80s, early 90s, there was this like hair craze where like big hair was really in, like
Hmm.
teased hair. And oftentimes they had these clips that would be at the top of the head, and it would sort of create this fountain effect where the hair would pop out. Um, so I found one of the drawings, and it said in the corner that I wrote when I was 9 or 10, say, and it said Hair Pop Out Mania. And almost every single image from my childhood drawings all had the clip at the top of the head with the hair coming
Hmm.
out. And when I was in the early stages of just making those postcards and those bags back in New York, little one offs, in my 20s, that's what I called it. And that's what my friends started to call it. And it just never, I just stuck with the name. Again, it
Yeah.
just feels authentic to where it came from. I think, you know, the reason I think art can be so beautiful is that it's honest and it has a story and it comes from somewhere. And so I've always tried to keep that authenticity and keep that reference to my
Hmm.
childhood because it feels like the story is very genuine.
Right. And so since then, getting a bit more of a, I guess, an art education or exposure to the art world, who would you say are your inspirations today for your pieces?
I would say my friends and pop culture. I feel like I get inspiration from other outlets of art,
Hmm.
certainly visual art, but I kind of take sprinklings of everything I come into contact with. Picasso is definitely an influence of mine with like sort of the one eye and the abstract quality. I get a lot of references to Peter Max, who did the Beatles album art. Yeah, Andy Warhol, Antonio Lopez, pop art
Hmm.
sort of people. Definitely, like I feel like I'm inspired by them, and it sort of fits in that genre.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Some other questions that I had for you were actually around your career as a dancer. So you mentioned you did some work on Nickelodeon as a choreographer. So walk me through, how is it that you came into dance as kind of your initial career path?
Yeah, I went to a summer theater workshop at the high school in my town, and me and my friends were like, let's try it. And we went,
Yeah.
and we would do improv games and these acting games. And the teacher at that time, who I went on to work with all through middle school and
Hmm.
until I graduated high school, as my drama teacher, was like, you're pretty good. And I was like, my gosh, I'm good at something. And I found my people and I found my niche, and so
Hmm.
I started doing musicals. And I loved the people who could tap, and I loved the girls who really knew how to dance. And you could tell that they went to a dance studio and were getting
Right.
training, and then they were also in the musicals. And so, I must have bugged my mom, and she had the foresight to put me in dance. So I went to school. After school, I went to drama. And then after drama, I went to dance. And that was my life from eighth grade until I graduated high school and
Mm,
went to college as a dance major in New York City.
yeah.
And from there, my professional career blossomed, and I was fortunate enough and worked really hard to work professionally for the last 22 years. And I'm
Mm,
still actually performing. I just shot a short film 2 weeks
yeah.
ago. So it's, you know, it's one of those things where I'm also trying to get out there to people that you don't have to just pick one thing, that it's
Mm.
really possible to be an artist in many different facets, many different realms, and that you don't need to just identify as one thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So during your time in New York, what would you say were your preferred styles?
In college, we were definitely like, it was a very regimented classical program, like ballet five
Hmm.
days a week, modern 5 days a week. With my theater background, like, I knew that that was the direction I wanted to go. I just needed more training. So, musical theater style, tap jazz,
Hmm.
I went on to do a national tour of a Broadway show, lots of regional theater, cruise ships. I started in theme parks. So, very much the musical theater.
Some parts mixed media artist, some part dancer. I guess what else from the art world do you immerse yourself in that we haven't covered yet?
I loved to write. I loved English. I loved writing. Talked the head of the English department in seventh grade to put me in gifted English because I just, you know, I wanted to, excel. And I've always journaled. Like there were
Hmm.
like 3 years that I like journaled every single day for a half an hour. So I've compiled like journals and journals and journals. And
Hmm.
oftentimes the journaling would turn into a poem or a short story. And I've been part of a bunch of different writing groups online and in person. And so right now, what I'm working on in my spare time is collecting my short stories, my poems, my childhood. I
Hmm.
saved all those, found those pieces, things I wrote in English class, things I wrote on my own. And I'm going to do like a
Hmm.
collection of my works
Yeah.
and illustrate them myself since I do that. And some photography, and link it in with my dance career and just make like a sort of mixed media book.
Wow, that's incredible. It sounds like you
Yeah.
have a lot of creative energy. I guess how would you recommend people tap into that creative energy, especially people who feel blocked?
I think one of the most pivotal and helpful things I ever did was Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. I had always journaled before, but there's this thing called the morning pages where before you do anything like make coffee, pick up your phone,
Hmm.
check your email, whatever, is that you write 3 pages of
Hmm.
stream of consciousness writing, where you just write. And they call it brain drain. And it sort
Hmm.
of like helps you just like get out of the way of thinking you can't do something because you're just sort of actively doing it.
Hmm.
And it's a several week process, the book with lots of activities and things,
Hmm.
assignments and tasks that you're supposed to do. And that really opened my eyes up to getting out of my way and two, dabbling in other
Hmm.
creative modes. So I highly recommend if you haven't or if anyone is. It's it's kind of directed towards artists who are stuck and needing to like get back into it, but it's certainly approachable for anyone. Some of those lessons and those tools and exercises like journaling I still do, and it's super super helpful for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So a daily practice. And sorry, can you repeat the name of the book or the program?
Yeah, it's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I'm just trying to see if I.
The Artist's Way. Nice. I'll have to look that up. I myself, I would say I have a lot of creative energy, but definitely don't express it in any kind of artistic ways. For me, it's usually web design or podcasting or writing in some form. And that
Yeah,
tends to be my outlet, but can definitely agree with feeling blocked, especially recently. So I'll have to look into that book.
highly recommend it.
One thing I kind of want to go back to is the aspects of LGBT identity. How would you say that your LGBT identity has really melded with your work whether it's visual or in dance or otherwise?
Yeah, I think there's a couple sort of spokes to that wheel. I mean, as an educator, I feel
Mm,
like, most of my students know my sexuality, so I feel like there's a lot of purpose there as far as
right.
trust. If there's a student or someone who may be feeling like they identify that way, that I can be a positive role model for them.
Hmm.
I can be someone that they can confide in, someone that they can see can flourish and succeed in something that can oftentimes be times are different now, but I was had a really hard time as an
Hmm.
artist, a young artist, because of the ignorance and being bullied and called names and booed and
Hmm.
things like that. And so to have gotten past that and be able to sort of pass the torch to a different
Hmm.
generation and tell my story and have them see that you can succeed despite those adversities. And
Hmm.
I think that's a big part of, my identity and being able to integrate that into our community.
I know that you have been active in the queer community from a volunteering perspective. One of the things I read about was some of the work that you did with the Connie Norman Transgender Empowerment Center, which I know is in
Yeah.
our very own West Hollywood. So tell me a bit
Mhm.
about that.
Yeah, I one of my dear friends, Love Bailey, is a trans artist,
Mm,
amazing, amazing, fabulous artist, and through my collaboration with her as an artist and through our friendship, I become much more involved with the trans community, and we've done several shows. And she's had a solo show at the Connie Norman Center, and so I've learned a lot more about the community and um, have been able to recognize where I sit in a level of privilege as a gay white male, and being able to help another facet of our community, that
mhm,
is definitely much more under attack and fire, especially these days,
mhm.
in many ways. So that's been amazing, and great friendships that have come from my time at the Connie Norman Center and meeting friends and stuff through Love Bailey.
Awesome. No, I think that's fantastic. I think, especially today, with some of the hate and vitriol we've been seeing against the trans community, it's definitely important to come
Yeah,
together and use whatever privileges or access we have to try and benefit and help those
yeah.
members of our community, especially. So I think that's phenomenal.
Another sort of mantra or something that I go
Mm,
back to is that art is an act of service, right? It's oftentimes it can be very much about vanity with creating
mhm,
art. And while some of that is inevitable, we like our things to look good. We like to look good. We like to create things that we feel good about. It's really about releasing it to other people
mhm,
and letting people feel something from that, and kind of creating it and letting it go, letting it soar and fly, and creating a ripple effect. So for me, it's about being kind, making art that evokes conversation, like I
mhm,
said, that can bring strangers together, that can keep human connection alive in a day and age of technology where we're all very separate, or sort of distracted on our phones and things, to keep putting more purpose behind my art instead of creating it for the sake of creating it. What's the next step? What's the next level? What does it do? Does it just sit in my room and I look and stare at it, or do I share it with the world, and hopefully it sparks joy, and that joy ripples to that person who spreads joy and kindness, and then we're shaking things up in the world.
yeah, no, incredibly well put, and couldn't have said it any better. Well, that's everything I had on my side for you. So, I really enjoyed this conversation, really enjoyed having you on the podcast.
Likewise, I'm just happy that I get an opportunity and a platform to tell my story and hopefully inspire others to, get out of their way and create, because we are all artists, whether we know it or not.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dylan, for coming on. I really appreciated it.
Thank you.